Thank you very much for listening to this week's talk on the Sedra of Shoftim, the fifth Sedra in the book of Devarim. And we read this Sedra almost unfailingly the first Shabbos of the month of Elul, and we celebrate Rosh Chodesh of Elul on Thursday and Friday of this week. Thursday is the 30th day of the month of Av, and Friday is the first day of the month of Elul. And it is really one of those huge panorama jigsaw myriad jigsaw piece fitting moments to contemplate that the Sedras that we read in the month, approaching the month of Elul and in the month of Elul, dovetail so completely with the themes, the messages, and the expectations of the month of Elul. And these are the Sedras of Re'eh that we read the past Shabbos, which is asking, the Sedra is asking us to see with certain clarity, with certain vision, the preparations that we require based on the words that Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to the people of Israel as they stood before entry into the land of Israel. And in this week's Sedra of Shoftim, the theme of judges and justice, which is a paramount theme of approaching Rosh Hashanah, that we also refer to as Yom Hadin, which means Judgment Day, and the following Sedra of Kiseitse, when you go out, and this is again when you go out of the previous year, and Kisovo, when you come into the new year. So all of these headings, all of these themes are very much appropriate to the month of Elul leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Hadin. And this concept, this feeling of the way that spanning all of the millennia and wherever we are in the world, how there is such a unity of the wisdom that comes from the Torah, the wisdom that comes from Hashem. And this is something that I experienced firsthand this week. A simple visit to the Israel Museum, and we see in the Israel Museum you have the Dead Sea Scrolls, as they're called, and I believe they are the oldest surviving scrolls of the Torah, and much of the text that from 2,000 years ago, it's the same text that we read today, of the Torah text. And then similarly in the Israel Museum, there were shawls that had been taken from various parts in the world, from Suriname in South America, in Cochin in India, and Venice, and to see the different styles of shawl, but to see the Oron, the ark which houses the Torah scrolls with the similar inscriptions, know before whom you stand, and the fact that this is the house of Hashem, and we see these similar inscriptions written in very different time periods in very different places in the world, and I think that this gives us a sense of continuity, of the perfection and the wisdom that is transcending any kind of local custom or fashion. And this is something that we tap into as we read the words every single Shabbos. And just looking at the themes of this word, this Sedra Shoftim, and I want to head it, be judgmental. And this actually flows against the core idea of the Torah, that actually is based on the idea that every single person is completely unique, and therefore we cannot judge another human being in a personal context. And we have this in a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of Our Fathers, and we find this in chapter 2, Perek Beis, Mishnah 5, and the words quoted by Hillel are, "V'al todin es chavercha ad shetagia limkomo." Do not judge your fellow until you reach his place, literally. And one of the interpretations given to his place is his point of origin. And since nobody is born with the same DNA, has exactly the same experience, even identical twins born and raised in the same house, there is going to be some level of difference. And so since we can never really understand, we can never really replicate what any other individual has within them and experienced as well, we can never effectively judge them. But I think that there are two important contexts when we are required to be judgmental, and these contexts are brought about or certainly described in this week's Sedra of Shoftim. The first context is the public context that the Torah is requiring, and the words of the Sedra open with the requirement to establish a system of courts and justices. The Sedra opens chapter 16, verse 18. Shoftim v'shotrim titein lecha. You should appoint judges and police officers for yourself. B'chol sha'arecha, in all of your gates. Asher Hashem Elohecha nosein lecha, that Hashem your God is giving to you. L'shvatecha, according to your tribes. V'shoftu es ha'am mishpat tzedek, and they should judge the people according to a righteous judgment, or they should judge the people correctly. So in this first context of establishing a judicial system, this is something that we encounter in the book of Bereshis, in the 7 Noahide laws, that every single community is expected to set up this system of justice. And it is essential for the functioning of any society that there are the known rules and the consequences that attach to not observing these rules. And so this is an important area that we can frame not as an exception to the overall principle that we cannot judge another individual, which is so crucial in the run-up to Rosh Hashanah, when we are trying to improve our conduct between our interpersonal relationships. And one foundation aspect of that is not to judge other people, and to always remember that and hold ourselves back from judging. But as a society, we need to make sure that there are healthy systems of justice that are functioning and are righteously applied. So that is the first context that is so important. The second context of the exception to this idea that we cannot judge other people, which again is not an exception. We cannot judge other people, but we can and we must judge ourselves. And this is introspection, this is evaluation of what I've done wrong, what I've done right, what I can do better. And in this respect, it is so perfectly appropriate for the month of Elul as we lead into Rosh Hashanah. So a very esoteric interpretation of this, the first pasuk that I just read out about the need to appoint judges and officers, police officers, as part of the system of national judicial functioning, is this idea that there's a sort of a midrashic view that there's a way of understanding this appointment, that we are actually asked that the gates that are referred to are actually the gates of our face, our eyes, our mouth, our ears, and we need to appoint judges and police officers, as it were, over all our senses, so that whatever we see, hear, say, that wherever we experience and express, that we have this judicial filter, as it were, present. And again, such a hugely important lesson for this particular time period. It is really very appropriate to look, I think, at the convergence of these two themes, the theme of the communal justice system and the need for personal introspection. And I think that we can see how these two themes converge in the last portion of the Sedra of Shoftim. And we could call this this is often referred to as the Egla Arufa, and perhaps also referred to as the unsolved murder. And we find this in chapter 21 of Devarim, and it says as follows: Ki yim yimotzei halal ba'adama asher Hashem Elohecha nosein lecha. If a murder victim is found in the ground, which is lying in the field that Hashem your God is giving to you, Larishta, as an inheritance, Nofel Basade, has fallen in a field, Lo Noda Mihi Kohu, it is not known who killed him. V'yotzu Zakenecha V'Shoftecha U'modadu El He'orim Asher Sevivos Hechalol, and the elders and the judges should go out and measure to the distance from where the corpse is lying to the cities that are surrounding the corpse. V'haya ha'ir hakrova el hechalal v'lokhu ziknei ha'ir hahi eglas bakar asher lo ubad ba asher lo moshcha ba'ol. And the city that is found to be nearest, according to these precise measurements, nearest to where the corpse is lying, and the elders of that particular city, should take a calf that has not had a yoke on it, and which has never been used for any work first, and then has not had a yoke on it. V'hordu ziknei ha'ir hahi es ha'agola es ha'eglo al nachal eson asher lo ye'oved bo v'lo yizara, and the elders of the city should bring the calf down to a rock-hard valley, which was never tilled or sown, and there in the valley, v'arpo shom es ha'egla banachal, and they should break the neck of the calf in this flow of this river, this flow of water. V'nikshu hakohanim b'nei Levi kibom b'char Hashem Elokecha l'sharso, and the priests should draw near, the sons of Levi, because Hashem has chosen them l'sharso, to minister to him, u'levarach b'shem Hashem, and to bless the name of Hashem. Va'al pihem yiyeh kol riv kol nega, and they, according to their word, every argument should be decided, and there should be a conclusion, for whole nega, and every plague, every problematic incident. And all the elders of that city that is closest to the corpse, Yirchatzu es yedehem al ha'egola, they should wash their hands over the calf, ha'arufa banachal, that had his neck broken in the river. Va'onu, and they shall answer. Va'omru, and they shall say, Yodenu lo shofchu es hadam hazeh. Our hands did not spill this blood. Ve'einenu lo ra'u, and our eyes did not see. Kaper la'amcha Yisrael asher padisa Hashem, forgive, atone for your people Israel, that you have redeemed Hashem. V'al titein dom noki b'kerev amcha, and do not let innocent blood be given b'kerev amcha, in the midst of your people Yisrael. V'nichaper lohem hadam, and the blood will thus be atoned for them. V'ata teva'er hadam hanoki, and if you then you will cleanse the innocent blood mikirbecha from your midst, kisase hayosha ba'einei Hashem, and you will do what is right in the name of Hashem. And this is taken to mean that if the murderer is found at a later date, that he should be executed, he should be punished accordingly, that this ceremony does not absolve him from the guilt. So how this passage, which we could say seems very far from our experience today, is actually bringing together the themes of communal justice and looking carefully at our personal responsibility and liability. The elders of the city, the whole process where measurements were taken, that an isolated person has been murdered, found in the middle of nowhere, but there's no such thing as the middle of nowhere. And by taking these painstaking efforts to measure the distance and find the place that is closest, we are being asked to understand that every single human life is so precious, and we are going to make the efforts to find the concentrated area of dwelling, the city, that possibly is the place that this victim, this murder victim, has come from at the beginning of his journey. And then, even though the elders of the city, the officials, may never have had an actual opportunity to meet him, to help him, the fact that he has been so vulnerable and so isolated, and the Gemara and the Mishnah actually fill in the missing gaps. And one explanation is given that the elders themselves were responsible, that they did not, that the townspeople, and there's a collective made up of individuals, that there was no either community institution or individual that helped this person, this individual, this lone individual, and gave him hospitality, gave him food, gave him shelter. And if they would have done so, then he would have perhaps been more energized to perhaps resist the person, the robber, or whoever performed this evil act of murder. And the absence of that hospitality that the leaders are responsible for. It's not just a question of washing hands, that individuals will say, oh, it's not up to me, the leaders need to do it. The leaders will say, oh, but I'm sitting in court, it's not my responsibility. It's the people in the local synagogues, it's the people who see a lonely person who doesn't seem to have any means of anywhere to sleep, anywhere to eat. But there is this idea that the leaders are going to take the responsibility on behalf of all of the individuals. And it's this concept of not having the actual hospitality within the town. And then there's another area where there was a lack of personal contact, of this concern for an individual, whereby he was escorted out of the town. And we have this custom that when somebody leaves, that we actually walk a few paces with them. We see this from Avraham Avinu, and we are following in footsteps when we have guests in our home and we walk some way out, to the front door, beyond the front door, and in this way we give them that feeling of connection, of support, of somebody who cares about you and isn't just letting you find your way alone. And because there is this possibility that a very vulnerable individual has left a town, even though there is no direct guilt on the elders, on the judges, but there is still this sense of responsibility. There is this sense of we could have done better. And I think that in this final portion of the Sedra of Shoftim, we are able to really reflect on the very deep and eternal messages of the Torah that have survived the millennia, that all over the world we are reading these words at this time of year and have been doing so for thousands of years. And these words are talking to us, perhaps in a slightly different context, in exactly the same way their message, the relevance is something that transcends all time. And that is that message of realizing the value and the importance of these strong judicial institutions and responsibilities. Yet that does not take away from the individual responsibility for, just like the judges in the proportion of the Egla Arufa, just like these judges had to really make sure that they are looking inside themselves as individuals. Where could they have been more closely involved? Where could they have been better role models for the townspeople, so that if not they themselves, somebody else would have provided that hospitality, provided that escort. And these are so pertinent for us as we celebrate the first Shabbos of the month of Elul, and really maximize all of these messages and feel that connection that really crosses all the boundaries of time and place, all for all time, in the way that only the Torah can. Thank you very much for listening, and wishing everybody a good Chodesh and Shabbat Shalom.